Hello. Welcome again as we look at another piece of archaeology or history that supports the historical reliability of the Bible. Is the Bible historically reliable? The Bible tells about a lot of different people and events. Did the people actually exist? Did the events actually happen? Let's look at one of these. In the Old Testament, we read of a dramatic event when the armies of the Assyrian Empire approached the gate of Jerusalem. A representative of the Assyrian emperor, Sennacherib, brings a message to King Hezekiah of Judah. The Assyrians had already conquered all cities and kingdoms in their path. The northern kingdom of Israel was no longer even in existence at this time. The Assyrian forces had conquered it along with everything else. The boundaries of the Assyrian Empire would stretch from at or near the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea in the north, to the Persian Gulf in the east, to the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean in the west. They would soon conquer even mighty Egypt, and they would continue into the heart of the African continent in the south. They were the mightiest fighting force that the world had ever known. But the Bible claims that they did not conquer Jerusalem. It claims that King Hezekiah asked the prophet Isaiah for advice. Isaiah's advice was this: "Therefore thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mound against it. By the way that he came, by the same he shall return, and he shall not come into the city, says the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it, for my own sake, and for the sake of my servant David." Hezekiah prayed to God, and we read in the Bible that the angel of the Lord killed 185,000 Assyrians, and the Assyrian army withdrew to their own land. Are we to believe that even if a man by the name of Hezekiah existed, that the city of Jerusalem would be the lone surviving dot in the expansive map of the Assyrian Empire? And if so, why Jerusalem? Cities and kingdoms of equal or greater status and earthly power had fallen like dominoes or would soon do so. The Elamite city of Susa, the Mesopotamian city of Ur, the island of Cyprus, Damascus, the capital city of Syria, Sidon, Tyre, the Edomite kingdom, Samaria, the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, all fell easily to the advancing Assyrian army. Powerful Egyptian cities like Memphis and Thebes would fare no better. How could the little city of Jerusalem withstand the might of the Assyrian forces? Was it all just an heroic story and myth invented in later years to create a legendary past for the Jewish people? The Assyrians kept records of their conquest. Part of this record is found on what is known by some as the Prism of Sennacherib. There are actually 3 prisms with the same information. The Taylor Prism, the first discovered of the 3, found in 1830 and now housed in the British Museum. The Oriental Institute Prism, housed in the Oriental Institute of Chicago. And the Jerusalem Prism, which is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It was typical of ancient rulers to make such over-the-top, vain, bragging statements that we don't hear their like today, even from the most outrageous politicians of our time. For example, in an Assyrian document from a couple of hundred years earlier in the 9th century BC, known as the Standard Inscription of Ashurnasirpal, we read this about the Assyrian emperor Ashurnasirpal. "Ashurnasirpal, priest of Ashur, favorite of Enlil and Ninurta, beloved of Anu and Dagon, the weapon of the great gods, the mighty king, king of the world, king of Assyria, the valiant man who acts with the support of Ashur, his lord, and has no equal among the princes of the 4 quarters of the world, the wonderful shepherd who is not afraid of battle, the great flood which none can oppose, the king who makes those who are not subject to him submissive, who has subjugated all mankind, the mighty warrior who treads on the necks of his enemies, tramples down all foes, and shatters the forces of the proud, the king who acts with the support of the great gods, and whose hand has conquered all lands, who has subjugated all the mountains and received their tribute, taking hostages and establishing his power over all countries." In Sennacherib's prism, Sennacherib brags in the same manner about himself. Sennacherib, the great king, the mighty king, king of the world, king of Assyria, king of the 4 quarters, the wise shepherd, favorite of the great gods, guardian of right, lover of justice, who lends support, who comes to the aid of the destitute, who performs pious acts, perfect hero, mighty man, first among all princes, the powerful one who consumes the insubmissive, who strikes the wicked with a thunderbolt. The god Asher, the great mountain, an unrivaled kinship has entrusted to me, and above all those who dwell in palaces, has made powerful my weapons, from the upper sea of the setting sun to the lower sea of the rising sun. He brags also about his military exploits. In Sennacherib's prisms, we find a reference to his campaign against Judah. We also find a reference to the name of the king of Judah, Hezekiah, just as the Bible said. Of the campaign against Judah, Sennacherib says this: "As for Hezekiah the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong walled cities, as well as the small towns in their area, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches, I besieged and took them. 200,150 people, great and small, male and female, horses, mules, asses, camels, cattle, and sheep without number, I brought away from them and counted as spoil. Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. His cities which I had despoiled, I cut off from his land. As for Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him." But in all of the bragging, perhaps the most important thing isn't what he said, but what he didn't say. He didn't say that he conquered Jerusalem, because he didn't. He couldn't just come out and say that this small city in the heart of his empire remained unconquered, so he put the best spin on it that he could. The Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Egyptians were apparently aware that something unusual happened at the gates of Jerusalem. The Babylonian historian Berosus said that God sent a pestilential distemper upon the Assyrians, killing many of them. The Greek historian Herodotus said that the Egyptians tried to claim credit for the repulsing of the Assyrian armies for one of their gods, saying that he sent a swarm of field mice into the Assyrian camp a bit farther south, and the mice ate the bowstrings of the Assyrian soldiers, causing them to retreat defenseless with great loss. But one of the problems with the Egyptians trying to claim credit for one of their gods is that the Assyrian forces came back and conquered both Upper and Lower Egypt, while Jerusalem remained unconquered, a small dot in the vast Assyrian Empire. King Hezekiah actually was an historical figure. He existed, not only in the pages of the Bible, but also in the military records of the Assyrians, and his prayer to God was answered. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, "O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, who art enthroned above the cherubim, thou art the God, thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. Thou hast made heaven and earth. Incline thy ear, O Lord, and hear. Open thy eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear all the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Of a truth, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the nations in their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire. For they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou alone art the Lord." Elements of the seemingly improbable story in the Bible of a small town in the heart of the Assyrian Empire prevailing against the overwhelming might of the Assyrian onslaught have been confirmed by the historical record. The remarkable was indeed true and did indeed happen. I hope that you'll join us again next week as we continue to look at evidences of the historical reliability of the Bible.